You know, engineers use this really fascinating concept called stress testing.
Right, yeah, like when they're building a bridge or something.
Exactly. I mean, they don't just guess when a suspension bridge might fail or, when an airplane wing might snap. They take the structure and they basically systematically crank up the pressure.
Just apply unbearable weight until something breaks.
Yeah, and then they wait to see exactly where that first microscopic crack appears. And usually, that happens in a highly controlled laboratory.
Safe and contained.
Right. But today, we're going to take you on a deep dive into what it looks like when that stress test happens live, just completely out in the open, across an entire society.
Yeah, it's pretty wild out there right now.
It really is. I mean, we are watching the Indian parliament grind to an absolute halt over a single exam. The domestic stock market is bleeding out because of a merchant ship thousands of miles away. And tomorrow.
Tomorrow is literally going to be the shortest day of the year.
Exactly. The Earth itself will literally spin faster than the laws of physics suggest it should.
It's just a profound convergence of events today. I mean, we are looking at a moment where the fundamental systems that we rely on, educational, judicial, geopolitical, and even planetary, honestly, are just being pushed to their absolute limits all at the same time.
So let's start with, I guess, the loudest crack in the foundation right now, which is the massive domestic stress test happening with the NEET-UG 2026 paper leak.
Yeah, this one is huge.
To understand why this has completely paralyzed Parliament, you really have to understand what this exam actually represents for people. I mean, this isn't just a tough test.
No, not at all.
The National Eligibility Cum Entrance Test is like the singular ultimate bottleneck for any student in India who wants to become a doctor.
Right. You've got nearly 2.5 million students fighting for barely, 100,000 medical seats?
Yeah, barely 100,000. It is just an intense multi-year pressure cooker.
Which is exactly why the market for leaked papers is so insanely lucrative. And it's also why a failure in the integrity of this exam is treated as basically a generational catastrophe.
Totally.
The resulting fallout has brought the entire legislative process to a standstill. You've got the opposition, led by Rahul Gandhi, who have completely stalled parliamentary proceedings.
Right. They're not letting anything move forward.
Exactly. And meanwhile, you have the Cockroach Janta Party, the CJP, out on the streets with this completely uncompromising demand. They want the immediate resignation of the education minister, Dharmendra Pradhan.
And the government's reaction is to basically just tear down the existing testing infrastructure, right? Like, they just fired 47 officials from the National Testing Agency, the NTA.
Yeah, and some of them are facing severe legal action, too.
But they aren't just firing people. They are actively importing an entirely new executive class.
Right, so that actually comes from the recommendation of the K. Radhakrishnan Committee.
Okay, what does that entail?
Well, they're bringing in these high-level contractual general managers to oversee the NTA. Like, they are hiring heavy hitters for cybersecurity, digital forensics, and test center operations.
Wow.
Yeah, they're even setting up a 247 security operations center.
A 247 center just for a standardized test.
Just for the test. It's going to be run by a new information security GM. And they're pulling in 16 young professionals who actually cleared all the UPSC exam stages but just missed the final merit list, and having them handle academic research.
Okay, and we also saw Prime Minister Modi releasing these late-night, almost selfie-style video messages.
Yeah, very emotional appeals.
Right. He's guaranteeing 1 crore rupees in compensation for the families of aspirants who died by suicide, which is tragic. And he's also promising no FIRs will be filed against peaceful protesters.
Which is a big concession.
It is. But let me stop you right there, because looking at this whole NTA overhaul, I mean, it feels like locking the bank vault after it's already been robbed,
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
If a system is so corrupted that exam papers are physically leaking out of strong rooms or just being sold openly on Telegram, is hiring a bunch of digital forensics experts actually addressing the root problem?
That's the big question.
Right. Like, is there any evidence that firewalls were the weak link, or was this just good old-fashioned human corruption?
Well, that right there is the crucial disconnect in how this crisis is being diagnosed.
Mm-hmm.
The government is attempting to treat a crisis of institutional integrity as if it were simply an administrative or like a technological bug.
Right.
They're operating on the logic that if you upgrade the encryption, install this 247 digital operations center, optimize the management structure,
Right.
boom, the system becomes secure.
But I mean, tech can't fix someone taking a bribe to just leave a back door unlocked.
Exactly. And that is exactly why the protesters and the opposition are flat out rejecting these structural reforms. To them, This isn't a broken firewall.
It's a people problem.
Yes. It's a fundamental breach of trust that goes all the way to the top. They're arguing that without top-level political accountability, which is why they're so hyper-focused on the education minister's resignation, all the highly paid cybersecurity managers in the world aren't going to prevent the next leak.
Which really brings us to the human cost of this whole standoff, because the physical toll out on the streets is becoming really severe.
It really is.
We just saw activist Sonam Wangchuk end this grueling 26-day hunger strike in support of the CJP protest. And we are talking about severe physiological breakdown here.
Yeah, he lost 11 kilograms.
Right, and he released a video from his hospital bed describing these catastrophic effects on his muscle tissue and his neurological function.
Just brutal to watch.
He explained how by day 20, he was literally lying on the ground, just fighting his own body for the strength to stay conscious.
And I think it's really significant that that hospital video wasn't just like a health update. It was a furious response to political rumors that were going around.
Oh, right, because union ministers J.P. Nadda and Jitendra Singh were there when he broke his fast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So naturally, these narratives immediately started circulating that Wangchuk had struck some sort of, backdoor deal.
And he was visibly angry about that.
Oh, absolutely. He basically asked if a month of cellular starvation wasn't enough to prove his sincerity. He pointed out the obvious, which is that political bargaining happens in comfortable, air-conditioned rooms behind closed doors.
Not while your organs are shutting down on a Delhi roadside in extreme heat.
Exactly. And the CJP immediately backed him up. They clarified that it was only his critical health that forced the end of the fast, but the demand for Pradhan's resignation remains absolute.
So that polarization is just accelerating everywhere you look. The physical protests are basically creating entirely conflicting realities.
Yeah, they really are.
And this is where we need to look at what happened at Rahul Gandhi's recent press conference. He brought forward this 19-year-old student, Sahil Lokab, who had medically confirmed pellet injuries to his eye and upper body.
Right, the visuals of that were intense.
Very. Gandhi actually physically lifted the student's shirt to show the wounds to the cameras. He claimed the young man was hit by police while just simply waving the national flag.
Now, obviously, this directly contradicts the government and the police force.
Completely.
They have categorically and repeatedly denied using pellet guns on protesters at any point during this whole thing.
Right. And we should note here, for you listening, as we look at these claims from both sides, our goal isn't to validate either side's version of events, but it is essential to see how deeply fractured these narratives have become.
Yeah, there's an absolute lack of shared reality right now.
And that lack of shared reality is what is paralyzing the entire legislative process.
Definitely. And, while the physical clashes continue on the ground, there is this massive digital and judicial battleground opening up in response.
Right, like the petition filed in the Delhi High Court.
Yeah, exactly. By the Software Freedom Law Center, or SFLC.NN. They're challenging the Union Ministry of Home Affairs.
Because the government has been repeatedly shutting down the internet around the protest sites, right?
Yes. They suspended mobile internet in a 1.5-kilometer radius around the Jantar Mantar protest site on 4 separate days.
Wow, just completely blacked it out?
Yeah. The mechanism they use for this is a temporary suspension rule that's tied to public emergency powers. But SFLC, Botkin, is arguing that deploying these emergency communication blackouts against peaceful demonstrations is just arbitrary.
And illegal, according to them.
Illegal and fundamentally unconstitutional.
It really seems like the judicial system is just being flooded with every single aspect of this crisis, which honestly kind of explains the controversy surrounding Chief Justice Surya Kant and the Supreme Court allegedly refusing to hear the students.
Right, which the Chief Justice actually had to publicly clarify.
Because people were furious.
They were. But the court did not refuse to hear the matter. The petitioners had basically bypassed the entire filing system and just submitted a one-page letter demanding an immediate hearing. So Chief Justice Kant had to explain the mechanics of the court to everyone. Like, yes, the Supreme Court is technically available 24 hours a day for genuine emergencies, but there is a rigid procedural architecture you must follow.
You can't just slide a piece of paper across a desk and demand a bench be convened.
Exactly. And once they actually filed a proper petition, it was scheduled normally.
Okay, but this exposes an incredibly glaring paradox in the government's grand solution to all of this.
Oh, so?
Well, PM Modi announced the creation of fast-track courts specifically to deal with paper leak cases. And the cabinet just approved these sweeping amendments like 10-year prison sentences and 10 crore rupee fines for anyone caught leaking exams.
Right. Sounds tough on paper.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
But the law ministry just tabled data in Parliament about how the existing fast-track courts actually function, and the numbers are just, they're mind-boggling.
Oh, they reveal a system that is fundamentally overwhelmed.
Totally. They have a mounting backlog of over 2.45 lakh pending cases. Let's just look at the mechanics of 2025 for a second.
Okay.
These fast-track courts registered about 1.43 lakh new cases, but they only disposed of 66,500.
So they're taking in twice what they can put out.
Exactly. So the backlog is expanding drastically every single year. It's like adding a VIP lane to a highway that is already backed up for 50 miles.
You're just changing where the cars are parked.
Right. They still aren't moving anywhere. So if the ultimate solution to this exam crisis relies on an already broken judicial system, aren't these new 10-year prison sentences completely meaningless?
In practice, yes. They're essentially zero deterrent laws.
Because no one's actually getting convicted anytime soon.
Exactly. If we look at why these courts are clogged, it's not a lack of legislation. It is a severe infrastructural deficit. Fast-track courts still require forensic labs to process digital evidence from a paper leak, right?
Yeah.
They still require police to file charge sheets on time, and they still suffer from vacant judicial benches and endless procedural adjournments.
So the bottleneck is everywhere.
You can pass a law threatening a 10 crore fine, but if the enforcement and judicial mechanisms take a decade to actually convict someone, the immediate deterrent effect on a criminal network just evaporates.
That makes a lot of sense.
The civil liberties issues like the internet blackouts, the alleged police force, those impact citizens in real time. But the justice for the underlying crime, that's stuck in a permanent bottleneck.
The system is cracking under the sheer volume.
Yeah.
But, as much as this domestic gridlock feels all-consuming, we're seeing equally severe stress tests happening on the global stage.
Definitely.
And the geopolitical friction happening right now is going to directly dictate the cost of your groceries and the value of your savings.
For sure. Because the geopolitical fault lines have suddenly become incredibly volatile on two entirely different fronts.
So let's start with the diplomatic friction in the East. India just delivered an exceptionally sharp rebuke to China following a meeting in Manila.
Right. Beijing released a statement claiming that External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar somehow agreed with their stance on Taiwan and Tibet.
Which didn't go over well.
No. The Ministry of External Affairs fired back immediately. They essentially said, before you put words in our mouth about your sovereignty, you need to answer for the illegal occupation of Indian territory in Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh since 1963.
Wow. Okay, but help me understand the history here, because India's stance on Taiwan has always been very carefully calibrated, hasn't it?
Extremely calibrated. To really understand this flashpoint, you have to look back to 2010.
Okay, what happened then?
Prior to that, India actually did formally endorse the One China policy. But in 2010, China began this practice of issuing stapled visas rather than stamped visas to Indian citizens from Arunachal Pradesh and Jammu and Kashmir.
Wait, stapled visas, basically implying those regions were disputed territories, not sovereign Indian land?
Precisely. By just stapling the visa to the passport, they were refusing to recognize the Indian passport's authority over those residents.
That is super passive-aggressive.
Right. So in response, India immediately dropped all explicit references to the One China policy. And since then, India's approach to Taiwan has been a strict no-change policy.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning they aggressively maintain economic, technological, and trade ties with Taipei, but without offering formal diplomatic recognition.
Got it.
So when China bracketed Tibet with Taiwan in their official readout, it was a highly calculated provocation. And the MEA's response about 1963 was India just pulling the historical trump card right back.
Okay, so you have this highly calibrated diplomatic chess match happening in the East. But if you look west, the Middle East is quite literally on fire, and the mechanisms of global trade are breaking down.
It's escalating so fast.
The U.S. military just disabled a second merchant vessel in the Gulf of Oman for attempting to breach a blockade of Iranian ports. And in retaliation, Iran's Revolutionary Guard is warning all Gulf nations to stay away from bases hosting U.S. troops because they're actively targeting them.
Yeah, we are on the 13th consecutive night of strikes.
Plus, Saudi Arabia is hammering Yemen in retaliation for Houthi attacks. The entire region is just escalating violently.
And this is exactly where all that high-level geopolitical theory crashes directly into your personal wallet.
Right.
Because if you want to know how a missile strike in the Gulf of Oman affects you, Just look at the Indian markets. The Sensex and Nifty just fell for their 5th consecutive session.
I've always looked at the stock market like a global seismograph. It feels the tremors from thousands of miles away.
That's a great way to put it.
But walk us through that transmission mechanism. How does a disabled ship near Iran actually wipe out billions of rupees in domestic market value here in India?
The primary mechanism transferring that conflict into the Indian economy is just the price of oil.
Okay.
When you have active military engagements near the Strait of Hormuz, which is the most critical maritime choke point for global energy shipping insurance premiums, absolutely skyrocket.
Because the ships might get blown up.
Exactly. So that instantly spikes the cost of Brent crude, which recently crossed $100 a barrel before settling around $97. Now, India imports more than 85% of its crude oil.
That is a huge dependency.
Huge. So when that price surges, India essentially imports inflation. Fuel costs rise, transportation costs rise, manufacturing becomes more expensive.
Which I imagine squeezes corporate profit margins across the board.
Exactly. And when inflation rises, the central bank can't cut interest rates to stimulate growth.
Right.
Suddenly, foreign institutional investors, the FIIs, they look at the Indian market, they see rising inflation and new U.S. trade tariffs squeezing export sectors, and they hit the sell button.
Wow.
We just saw nearly 3,000 crore rupees in FII outflows in a single day. Capital flees emerging markets for safe havens whenever the globe destabilizes.
Which requires an impossible balancing act for the government.
Absolutely.
India is trying to project absolute strategic strength against a superpower like China in the East, while simultaneously watching its domestic markets bleed out from a U.S.-Iran conflict in the West that it has absolutely zero control over.
It really shows you how fragile our economic systems are when exposed to external pressure.
It does. And speaking of systems failing under pressure, we are seeing nature reflect this chaos right back at us.
Oh, man. The meteorological data out of Gujarat this week is staggering.
Ahmedabad just experienced a deluge that is almost hard to comprehend. The India Meteorological Department recorded 294.6 millimeters of rain in a single 24-hour period.
Almost 300 millimeters in a day.
Yeah, that makes it the 4th highest single-day rainfall total in nearly a century. In a matter of days, the system dumped enough water to wipe out Gujarat's entire 31% seasonal rain deficit.
That is insane.
Right. There are talukas in South Gujarat that have received 100% of their average full-season rainfall in roughly a week. But while it solved the deficit on paper, the sheer mechanics of that much water falling that quickly completely exposed the city's infrastructure.
Well, yeah, because modern urban drainage systems are engineered based on historical flow rates.
Right, what they expect to happen.
When you introduce a century-level volume of water in just a few hours, the runoff capacity is instantly overwhelmed. The pipes don't just fill up. The hydro pressure backs up the system, turning streets into floodplains.
It is the literal definition of a system breaking under extreme volume.
Exactly.
Now, before we look at a system breaking on a planetary scale, it's worth noting that sometimes the chaos we perceive is entirely manufactured by the systems we built.
Very true.
If you follow cricket, you probably saw the absolute meltdown on social media over the IPL 2026 handshake between Travis Head and Virat Kohli after the RCB Sunrisers game.
Oh my gosh, that was everywhere.
Everywhere. Algorithms pushed the drama, Head's wife received vile online abuse, and it became this massive narrative. Well, Travis Head finally gave an interview and said there is, quote, nothing to patch up.
Yeah, he explained it was just 2 athletes with high competitive intensity.
Right. And the entire controversy was basically an illusion generated by slow-motion cameras and engagement-hungry algorithms. It's a really good reminder that our digital systems are literally designed to artificially stress test our emotions for profit.
That is a vital point. We often conflate algorithmic noise with actual systemic failure.
Yeah.
But the final piece of data we have today is definitely not an algorithmic illusion. It is a fundamental shift in the mechanics of the planet itself.
Yes. Tomorrow, Sunday, July 26, 2026, is scientifically predicted to be the shortest day of the year.
And not because of daylight hours or solstices.
No, because the physical sphere of the Earth is spinning faster on its axis. A standard day is exactly 24 hours, or 86,400 seconds. Tomorrow will be 0.65 milliseconds shorter than that.
Which doesn't sound like a lot, but for physicists, it's huge.
And this isn't a one-off anomaly. In 2025, we recorded a day that was 1.37 milliseconds shorter. We are currently living through a phase of record-breaking short days.
It is happening at such a consistent rate that global timekeepers are seriously debating the implementation of a negative leap second for the first time in human history.
Wait, a negative leap second?
Yeah, we've added seconds before to let a slower Earth catch up to our atomic clocks, but we have never had to skip a second because the planet was outpacing us.
But wait, let's look at the physics of this because it seems to contradict everything we've learned recently.
How so?
Well, we know that climate change is melting the polar ice caps. The mass of that water is moving from the poles toward the equator.
Right.
The classic analogy is the figure skater, right? When a spinning skater throws their arms out wide, the redistribution of mass slows their rotation down.
Yes, conservation of angular momentum.
So if melting ice is putting the Earth's arms out, why are we suddenly experiencing a phase where the planet is revving up?
It's a brilliant question, and it reveals a massive tug-of-war happening between the Earth's surface and its core.
Yeah.
The physics of the figure skater analogy are completely correct for long-term trends. Melting polar ice, combined with the tidal friction caused by the moon's gravitational pull on our oceans, acts as a braking mechanism. Over centuries, they are definitely slowing the Earth down.
Okay, so what is overpowering that brake right now?
Well, the Earth is not a solid billiard ball. Beneath the crust and the mantle, you have massive, sloshing, liquid outer core made of molten iron and nickel.
Right.
Scientists are observing that angular momentum is being transferred between the solid mantle and this liquid core. Unpredictable short-term fluid dynamics deep inside the planet are essentially acting like an internal engine that has suddenly accelerated.
Wow.
So the core is dragging the solid mantle along with it, forcing the planet to spin faster, even as the melting ice on the surface tries to drag it to a halt.
So the inside of the planet is literally fighting against the outside of the planet.
Precisely. And current models suggest this internal acceleration has likely peaked, meaning the Earth is slowly beginning to decelerate again as the surface braking takes over. But as a physical phenomenon, it is a perfect encapsulation of what we are seeing across society right now.
It really is. I mean, when you step back and look at the anatomy of this specific day in July 2026, you realize we are watching massive, complex systems overlapping and pulling in completely contradictory directions.
Yeah, everywhere you look.
We are watching the internal mechanisms of India's education and judicial networks tear themselves apart under the pressure of millions of students and millions of backlogged cases. We are watching delicate diplomatic maneuvering in the East violently clash with the economic realities of global shipping in the West.
It's all connected.
And we are even watching the molten core of the Earth fight against its own melting surface.
And it leaves you with a deeply unsettling question when you look at how we choose to respond to all this pressure.
What do you mean?
Well, our instinct right now is to rush in massive high-tech investments to solve our crises. Like, we are hiring chief information security officers to protect exam papers from being leaked.
Right.
And we are deploying advanced military naval blockades to protect shipping lanes in the Gulf.
So we apply high-tech bandages to fundamental wounds.
Exactly. Yet, while we invest billions in these advanced countermeasures, our most basic foundational systems are the ones actually collapsing. A century-level rainstorm overwhelms the basic drainage pipes in Ahmedabad.
Yeah.
250,000 backlogged cases render sweeping new judicial laws completely useless.
It's totally paradoxical.
It makes you wonder, are we becoming a society totally obsessed with building impenetrable high-tech roofs while completely ignoring the fact that the foundations of our own house are washing away?
Because when the ultimate stress test comes and the pressure is finally applied, it's never the shiny new technology that burns first. It is always the foundation that gives way.
Always.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the narratives around you. Look closely for those hidden cracks in the systems we take for granted, and we will catch you next time.